let's talk about about teams, a little bit more about teams. We left off at about this slide here, slide 33. Well, we actually left at slide 34, but just to sort of go back to get to a point where we can sort of continue from and sort of just a little bit of revision and then let's get going. So the whole concept here is about the team, the service desk working together. The service desk represents the organization. What the customer sees in the service desk is going to reflect on how they feel about the organization. That's what we mean by frontline. And so we need to, if we are in a service desk position, that's all that the customer might see of our organization is us in the service desk. And so we need to sort of bear in mind that whatever we do is going to reflect on the company. And so our teamwork toward that is important. This diagram, and I did mention this in our last discussion, so I'm just reviewing it here a little bit. The idea of the arrows going in many different directions, you could imagine that each one of those arrows represented a person in our team's personal goals. So you may have personal goals and they are in all different directions. So for example, I have some personal goals that might be related to health, and I like motorcycles. So, so my health does impact on my work. Obviously, I mean, I haven't missed a day of work in like 12, 15 years. And so health has been good, alhamdulillah. But I have to admit, part of the thing that I do to try and keep my health is because I just love riding motorcycles, right? And, you can't do that if you're not sort of healthy enough. And so, so that's a goal that I can align with my work. I can align with my work, but it might not have started out as aligned. So this is the point that here is that we may have other goals. So the riding of the motorcycles, that's not really a goal that aligns with my work, not much at all. Maybe there might even be people in a particular work that I go to that don't like motorcycles. I don't know. But the health thing, that's something that I can do that will align, and it works for both. Works for me personally and works for my work. And that's the kind of thing that we want to sort of focus on, I guess that we're saying. In a team environment, when we work for other people or with other people, we need to consider those things and sort of just tweak our goals a little bit. Now, some of the goals that we have are not personal goals. So we see some things here that how can we align our personal goals to these, right? So how can we align to increasing the rating of satisfaction that our customers have for our business? How can we align to have our training to be within the company's goals? How can we align to reducing the costs in our organization? And that's something that we think about individually, but then that becomes a contribution to the team. And I hope that makes sense to you. So as we say there, and that's why the heading of the next one is, we are contributing to the team by our personal actions. But how do we sort of measure that? We'll talk about that in a minute as well. The idea being that communication is part of that, but also self-development. So there are different things that we can use to measure. So metrics refers to measurement. So as it says, here's 3 different ways that whatever the service desk person is doing, we can measure that to see how they're contributing to their goals. Now, when we say we can, that could be the manager of the service desk, but it could also be the service desk person themselves, measuring themselves, because that's an important part of it as well. People should have their own personal goals, as we said just in a previous slide, and we should be working towards improving ourselves. We're always, I had this put to me once in a place where I worked. We always should be preparing for our next job interview, even while we're working in a company. And that was a place that I worked for 12 years, but it's true. At some point, either you or your company is going to need to terminate that arrangement because of some other thing that comes up. And hopefully that's always you because you see a better opportunity. And but you should always be keeping that in mind. So that means continual development of your skills, continually sort of updating. And as a 60-something-year-old guy, I can sort of relate to that as well. We can't really rely on what we knew when we were 30 years old. Certainly what I do now is kind of a little bit different than when I was 30. So this graph here, or sorry, this slide sort of relates to that. How can we measure our service desk people? How can they measure themselves to see if they are progressing towards goals that sort of help the service desk and help them individually? And so here's some things that we can measure. We can measure availability. Now you've heard availability referred to, I'm sure, in your IT, availability of a network, availability of an application. And we spoke to that directly when we talked about incident management, because an incident was when we lost availability of a network or an application. But here we're talking about availability of the service desk personnel. You know, how much of the time are they compared to the time that they're sort of allocated to answering the phone. So this talks about the ACD. So with the ACD, you know, you log into the ACD and then you make yourself available or not make yourself available. So it's like that. So how much of the time are they actually on there ready to take a call? And you know, how much of the compared to how much of the time have they stepped away from it? How long is on average are their conversations with their customers? And so I think you could see that there would be sort of a goal to do things efficiently. Efficiently would be shorter calls. But to get a shorter call that actually satisfies the customer and closes an incident, that means that we have to be very, very effective in that call. That is, that we're using that time in the call. We're actually able to communicate well with the customer so that we don't have to be on the call for a very, very long time. We can satisfy the customer quickly. Now, hopefully, it's obvious that a short call would usually be satisfactory to the customer. They're not calling you up for their social needs. They're calling you up to sort of satisfy an issue. And so, if we can do that in a short time, that's going to satisfy them. So it's good for them and it's good for the service desk because it's more efficient. Sorry, I went I hit the okay. So time idle. How much time are we not attending to things, and how long does it take us to wrap up things at the end of a ticket? So all of these things can be measured just by time and I suppose you could say applications on our ACD, we call it, automated call distributing software. With emails, those things can be measured as well. How many emails did we have to use to close an email query? Okay, and so we can measure that as the average number of exchanges in an email. How much time did it take us from the time that we received an email until we actually closed that incident? These things can be measured, and they would go towards the performance of your service desk person, towards the performance of the service desk as a whole. So we've got some other things here, and these again would be personal to the service desk people. Your reopen percent. Oh, this is a bad one. We want this to be a small number, but I want you to think of this. We went and we closed the ticket. We said it's finished. 2 days later, the customer called back and said, "You know that thing that you fixed for me? It's not fixed anymore." That's a reopen. So that means that we were not 100% in our actual managing of that ticket. We didn't actually close the incident. It was not a proper. So reopen percent, we really want that number to be down. And those things can be measured. We can see that when a ticket is opened, a new ticket is opened, that it relates to an incident that was closed before. Your resolution percent, well, some of your incidents you're going to resolve them right there at level 1, or do we have to hand them on to level 2, or are they unresolved? So we can measure that by a percentage. Now, the training investments thing, this is a comparison thing. So this is a nice one for managers. They like to see, okay, how much return am I getting on my investment? In this case, the investment that they're looking at is training for the service staff. So what they're going to do is they're going to measure the service staff resolution percent or whatever, and then they're going to give them some training, and then they're going to measure their resolution a percent again, and they're hoping that that number will go up, that the resolution gone up, because, and then they'll say, "Oh, see how good that training was. We did the training, and our numbers improved." Okay, so other things that we could do, you'll notice this. I'm sure if you've ever had any interactions with Arido or a bank or whatever. I keep using those examples because they're the ones that I've had lots of examples with. Uh, After you've had the interaction with them, you receive a message somehow. It might be an SMS. That's how I get my interactions often with from Arito. Would you please fill out this survey? Were you satisfied with the interaction that you had with our service personnel, et cetera? And so that would be a customer satisfaction survey. They're just checking that. The monitoring, that's the one where, and I'm sure you've had this too, because while you're waiting in the automatic in the queue from the automatic call distributor as a customer, you'll hear it say this call will be monitored for training and quality purposes or something like that. What that means is that the call is actually being recorded. And why? Well, so later the customer service representative and maybe their manager are going to listen to that and sort of say, oh, well, you did this right, you did that bad, you could have done this better, that type of thing. So that's what we mean by monitoring. So measuring managers, it's an old rule of thumb for management is you can't manage what you can't measure. And so if you want to have I guess you could say a scientifically managed service desk, you have to have some numbers that sort of go into that. And managers love numbers. Lets them do something at their desk. That sounds kind of cynical, doesn't it? All right. Okay. So the idea of working in a team. The next few slides just about this. We're going to talk a little bit about feedback. We're going to talk about contribution. We're going to talk a little bit about engagement. The idea being that in a team, you actually just have to put your foot forward. All right. You actually have to not sit back and wait for things to come to you and happen to you. It's about leaning into it. I guess we would say it's a modern way of talking about it. I hope I'm recording this. I am. Yes. Leaning into it, basically thinking ahead of time and putting as much as you can of yourself into the situation so that you are actively involved in improving it. So that's what we're asking for. That's what's required in the team, and in all of these areas, right? So accepting the goals of the team, dealing with conflict with other members of the team, not shrinking from it, but leaning forward into it and being an active participant. So that's what we refer to. And this graphic is supposed to represent that. So yeah, so being aware of other members of the team, their feelings, and acting to align those with the team. Expressing our own feelings in a positive way rather than sort of letting them stew. Accepting responsibility, okay, and engaging with other members of the team for the improvement of the team and themselves. So feedback's part of that, engaging with those other members of the team. And as the slide says, feedback is appropriate at certain times. So it's certainly appropriate. And this one is, I suppose, the first one is the one that people most often skip over, right? Somebody does something good. This is a great opportunity for you as a team member to sort of praise them. Hey, that was awesome. It costs you nothing to say to somebody, you did a great thing. And you don't have to be their manager to say that. You could just be their co worker. Hey, you did a great thing. I noticed that you did this. I like that. I mean, that's as I said, it costs you nothing, and it is a benefit to the team. Okay, it's going to deepen that relationship, and it's also going to make them aware that you are noticing, and that's reinforcing that behavior. They're more likely to do it again. Now, on the other hand, we may notice that things that people in our team are doing are not aligned with the goals of the team. This requires some feedback. This is also a hard one to do. We have this one costs a bit more, I suppose. The first one was cost free. Next one is not cost free. This one you're going to have to actually pay a cost, and that's the cost of a little bit of conflict. And sometimes conflict just needs to. We can't avoid it. If somebody is working at odds with the team, that has to be addressed. And the sooner it's addressed, the more likely that we're going to have a positive outcome. This is a little cartoon. I hope it's a little bit funny to you as it is to me. There's it's sort of a pun on words, difference between feedback and feedbag. So feedback, and you'll notice the very sort of, how you say, euphemisms and sort of words, um, multiplication of words that actually don't really say much. Okay, yeah, I'll give you some feedback. Yeah, okay, horse, you're pretty hardworking, but you're not the fastest horse that I ever had. And yeah, that's we all know that kind of bland feedback, which is just words that don't really say anything. And I guess we want to sort of kind of avoid that too much. There is times when we do need to feedback, and mentioned in the previous slide, somebody does something good, let them know that was good. When somebody does something that's against where we're trying to go, we need to say, hey, wait a minute. This needs to this is affecting the team, as it says here, and we need to sort of address that. So positive feedback, and we addressed this earlier when we were talking about communication, and so there's a lot of we keep coming back to that, coming back to communication. There's some things that the full range of communication, of human communication, actually sort of requires people to see each other, to to have that, to see their facial expressions. And actually, by the way, we have some person, we could talk for hours about this, but they're the person who's we would say like a psychopath. Why am I mentioning them? But what sort of identifies them, a narcissistic psychopath or whatever, these really, really bad people, what identifies them is they're able to sort of lie, and they're able to lie in so many ways, not just with words, but with the way that they react and their facial expressions and whatever. The only reason why I'm mentioning this is because that's so important to us as people. We look at other people, we look at their eyes, we look at their face, we look at their hands, we look at the way they're standing, and that gives us an idea of whether we can sort of trust what they're saying. Now, obviously, if we're working in a team, we want to be 100% truthful as much as we can. Now, there's some things that want to be careful with. Your coworker says, how does this dress look? Doesn't matter what you think. You're probably going to say it looks great, right? And that might not be that might not be honest, but that's that's a case where we sort of fudge that. But on other things like, how did I go with my calls this week? How many of those did I do? How's this account going? Those things we need to be 100% sort of honest with. But having said that, uh, with our other members of the team, things like that, uh, we want to be able to communicate with them so that they trust us, and so that that they understand what we're saying. And the best way to do that is actually face to face. And so, sorry, that was a long way of saying that. But sort of emails that we're sort of sending to people. You had an issue with this. That's going to be misunderstood. I mean, it says here maybe could be misunderstood. 100% it's going to be misunderstood. The only anything that's going to be negative like that has to be handled sort of in a um, compassionate, but sort of a face-to-face sort of situation, I would say. All right, so we need to give them that feedback, and we need to seek that feedback, and not just for our own um, the people at our own level in the organization, but also would you call them superiors, our bosses, or whatever. Okay, so communicating is important. I hope that in all those words that I just mentioned, that's obvious. Um, so the better we can be a communicator, the better we're going to be able to work in that team. But I would say underlying it all is just basic honesty. That if you're just basically honest in what you're doing, eventually that is going to be understood by your team members, and they're going to give you a big pass on a lot of other things. If in every situation you're 100% honest with them, it's going to be a lot easier for you. All right, so coming back to that. All right, so what do we do when we first enter a team? This diagram is supposed to represent that. We want to join up with the team. So how do we do that? Whenever we're coming into a group which has already been settled and we want to sort of enter that group, there's going to be a little bit of these things going on, a little bit of mistrust. Just can't be helped, right? You're going to have to basically prove yourself. And so, how are you going to prove yourself? Well, you're probably going to have to just do a little bit more than the bare minimum. And so, working hard, showing a willingness to work with others, showing a willingness to go a little bit of extra mile, showing a bit of willingness to sort of accept other people's ideas, um, being teachable, I guess we could say, not sort of coming in with a too big a ego, even if you know a lot. I mean, you are new to the team and you sort of need to get used to the what's going on. You have to accept the fact that other people in the team have some advantage of understanding, experience, knowledge that you need to sort of tap into. That's part of learning the lingo, meaning the language, the words. So in each different work environment, over time, they develop their own sort of way of addressing things. You could say their own language. And you need to sort of pick that up. Yeah, volunteer to do extra things for people. Those things will ingratiate you into the team so that you are accepted quicker. And once you're accepted as a full member of the team, then your work will become better or easier. Ask questions. Be prepared to learn from others. Don't know everything. Even if you think you know everything, pretend that you don't. Um, and yeah, basically, get to know them. Be courteous. Be honest. Be willing to learn. Be willing to share, but in a respectful way. Those things build up trust, and then you become part of the team. Um, so you need to, I mentioned earlier that you need to lean into it a bit. You need to actually be present. You need to be aware of what the other people or the team are doing and how you can contribute to them. And so you cannot be inactive. And so you have to consider what are your strengths and bring them. And part of the being honest, which I mentioned, is you're going to recognize areas where you have an idea which is not expressed in the team, but is valuable, and how do you put that into the team? And so that takes a little bit of skill. It takes a little bit of humility, balanced with assertiveness. And so, I mean, that a lot of what we do with other people is kind of like that. We have to sort of say, well, this is what I'm thinking, but acknowledging the fact that there are other ways of thinking about it. And so that's what we were talking about in this lesson is all about teamwork. The main features there that we discussed were the Tuckman model, but as it says here, we have a definition of a team, which is a group which is all working towards a common goal. The best teams, as it says here, they have diversity. That doesn't mean that we all come from different parts of the world. It could mean that, but it's not limited to that. What it means is that we have different skills that we bring, and we recognize those different skills in the people that are part of that team. Um, we have openness and trust. I hope that and I've said this so many times in this lesson already, but I hope that I've underlined the fact about the honesty there. That's going to make this happen a lot faster. And yeah, personal commitment. Mission and goals. I think we discussed that in previous lessons. Yeah, and communication. So let's have a little bit of fun. All right, so we got these three different things happening here, or three different entities, you could call them. We got, I actually, I don't know if we want to record this. So we finished talking a little bit about teams. Let's talk about our assessments in the project. Now, remember, this might look like a lot of work, but remember, it's instead of doing a final exam. You don't have to do a final exam in the course. You're doing this instead. So I think that's a win for you. And so you should look at it that way. All of the effort that you would have done preparing for a final exam you should turn toward this. So you need to be making a manual. It's got multiple chapters in it. You would have finished the first chapter, and then the second chapter here is you're going to explain how to create tickets. And then you should actually go to OTRS, create a couple of tickets, get some images, and insert those in the manual. It's with how to do steps. And that's due next week. So I wanted to refer to that. The other thing that we need to consider at the moment is you do have an assignment and you've been working on that, and that was due yesterday. Hopefully, if you haven't handed that in, you can. But there was a couple of things there. One of them, which was a matter of a lot of discussion, was about this role play and the scripts. And yeah, so that's kind of